Well, I think that, the cinema is basically the most pure, let's say, invention of the 20th century. So cinema coincided mostly with the modern period, and I think that every one living in this period is deeply influenced by it. I was kind of personally, in terms of formal and aesthetic qualities or visions, deeply influenced by perhaps two Italian filmmakers of the 60s. One, Michelangelo Antonioni, who was extremely intelligent in making modern, seemingly neutral and harsh environments look somehow inspiring and glamorous and full of meaning. And the other one was perhaps Fellini, who on the contrary was showing how every period could coexist, with Rome as a kind of prime example, of course, could coexist in a kind of very interesting way of coexist, of mutual influence and mutual dependency. Having said that, I wrote movie scripts, and what I think is the essence of a movie script is that it thinks of a number of one episode and the next episode. It thinks what people can do, but the most important thing is the interconnection between those episodes. And so it's kind of really not necessarily the content, but the formula of connection, of producing sequences, which I think is the most essential part of conceptualizing movies. And I think that once and so at some point, and that is actually the reason that I became an architect, I felt that the essence of architecture is very similar to the essence of writing scripts. In architecture too, you are thinking of an episode or of an event, and then you think of the next one, and you have to find an ingenious way of connecting A to B, which is not only ingenious, but also which tells a narrative, or which creates a shock, or which creates kind of intensification. There are many different kind of ways of doing it. But so the structural similarity between script writing and doing architecture is, I think, the key thing I imported from film. I believe it kind of long enough now to consider that maybe my so-called career has different phases, and in this part of my career, and we gave a lecture in Sao Paulo where we connected the different phases in the career to political and economic developments, and I would say that there's a very strong connection. Particularly in this moment, because when I kind of started in architecture, the public sector was incredibly strong. Most significant buildings were kind of inspired and triggered by the public sector. But since the 80s and since the kind of escalation of the market economy, of course, the initiative shifted from the kind of public sector to the private sector. And with that, the role of the architect, but also the space for the architect, I think has changed very drastically. And I would say that there's no coincidence that with the kind of peak of the economy in Wall Street, kind of somewhere around kind of 2000, the notion of the star architect also peaked, because kind of somehow I think the star architect is going to be the kind of architect that is necessary for that interpretation of the market economy. So since then, as we know, a lot of things have happened from 9/11 to crises. Apparently in Brazil the crises are not really that intense, so you're lucky to some extent. In Europe it is very, very serious. But it also means that this is a very good competition, a very good question. I think my answer goes really beyond competition, but my answer is really more about whether or what the difference is between an architectural project and a realized architectural project. And basically, if you start considering your life as an architect, assuming that only realized projects are of value or are the essence of the profession, then you're probably heading for a very sad life, because it means that only a kind of fraction of your ideas will be embodied. For me, it was very important, and I think that perhaps kind of being a scriptwriter was an important way of making it possible to read the life of an architect in that way. But a project, like a script, was equally valid as a kind of realized movie. And once you look at the career in that way, and it's very logical, because I think that many of the most influential kind of in architecture realizations are projects and never were built. Once you look at it that way, then a competition can be a very important way of making a statement which embodies your thinking at a particular moment, regardless of whether it wins or not. And fundamentally, we really continue to do kind of projects in that tradition and with that mentality. At the same time, it's also incredibly draining and, of course, insulting to know that the person who asks you to do a project is at the same time announcing that there is an 80% chance that your project will be kind of garbage in the next within 4 months. So it's a very, very difficult kind of situation. With seemingly no solution. Thank you. One of the kind of really great advantages of being a writer is that you can assume different identities. An architect is always the same kind of person, and there's a kind of very limited space for changes you can imagine. But if you're a writer, you can write a novel one day, you can write a poem the next day. You can write an anonymous book, or you can write under pseudonym. So, what has been for me a kind of very important reason to continue to write is that I could also assume different identities. And in certain identities about my writing, I assumed the identity of a deliberately optimistic person without moral values, who was like a clinical observation looking at the way things were. And after I've done that a number of times, it was very interesting, because it always provoked the same reaction of people saying this man has no morality, is an evil person, he has no soul. Then it became very exciting to kind of change his strategy and to write an incredibly emotional text, full of judgment, full of moral indignation against the way kind of things were at the current moment. And I called it judge space. And what I try to do is to really, and for me it's almost like a political threat, to write something about the monstrosity of the market economy and its consequences. That was really the point of it. And what I try to do is I try to not only write about architecture, not only about engineering, not only, but basically about politics, social issues, anthropology. In a way, it was a combination of everything. And you asked me how I think that the last 10 years, joint space has a bit evolved, or whether it's still as dire as the things like that. I would say largely yes, except that as our own responsibility, we're trying to find ways, preservation, for instance, being one of them, to try to find a way to retreat or pull out of those conditions. I also think that there is a possibility that the market economy, which doesn't seem to be doing that well at this moment, that kind of somehow in the next decade we will find ways to reduce our dependency on that kind of system of values, which is not a system of values. I gave the office a name, which Office for Metropolitan Architecture, which had nothing to do with me, which was in a period that every office was named after people. And so that was, in a certain way, a declaration. We have been very, very explicit in our collaborations. Metro is one of them. But in our collaborations with engineers, with but also, for instance, kind of artists, and really declared that and formed a polemic about the absurdity of this kind of focus on a single person in a work which is by definition teamwork, but which we can really extend it to become, wherever we can, the work of a kind of a whole constellation of people. Yet at the same time, there is of course from the outside a federal expectation that it's not really something we can do something about, so we don't lose any sleep over it.
For the students, it's always the case that if you have an office, the office has a name, and everyone that works there is part of that office. So whether it's Joshua or whoever working with REM as OMA team, when you sign your contract that you work with inside, outside, which is nice too, everything you invent, everything you do is part of inside, outside. So afterwards you can say, yeah, that was my idea. But actually the role that people like REM and also maybe I have is that you create a kind of collaboration within your studio. It's like an orchestra. You choose people with different intelligence, or you discover their intelligence while you're working, because some people come in and say, I'm really bad at that, but I'm really good at that. But you discover they're really bad at that, and much better at something else. And that's a really interesting process. So getting to know each other through work, that's why you all have love affairs within your profession, is really interesting and inspiring. But it's a collaborative work, and the role that REM and other people who lead the team have is that you give incentive and the first directions, and you are all the time commenting. In other words, you are composing all these ideas of people into one thing.
About it. And I think the real reason is that, again, from the inside, you don't think of importance. Importance is kind of something that is imposed on things from the outside. From the inside, you just kind of respond constantly to kind of changing kind of issues, possibilities, obstacles.